United States through educational and cultural exchange with offices in Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi. And other than advising, USCFP also has a programs department that administers multiple fully funded programs, including the Fulbright Scholarship. You can find all of this information on our website, www.uscfp.org. And along with the programs department, USCFP also has authorized prometric testing centers in Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad. The 2025, I would also like to tell each and every single one of you that the 2025 Fulbright Scholarship Program is also open for Pakistani applicants. Please keep in mind that the application deadline for this cycle is February 28th, 2024. And I'm so sorry, I think I was not recording this session. I would just like to let everybody know, and all of those who are watching this at home, once we have, uploaded this session on our YouTube and Facebook pages, that this is a statement of purpose workshop today that we're having with Kelly Ryan, and he's leading the session. And I would now like to introduce Kelly. So Kelly Ryan currently serves as a public diplomacy officer at the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan and was previously assigned to Washington, Colombia, and Bangladesh. Before joining the U.S. Foreign Service, Kelly worked as a consultant with the State Department and the U.S. Agency for the International Development and managed international exchange programs. He's a proud Fulbright alumnus and holds an MA in International Peace and Conflict Studies from American University and a BA in Political Science and Chinese Studies from Pacific Lutheran University. I think without any further delay, I would now like to request Kelly to begin his talk. And just a very small note to each and every single one of you. If you guys have any sort of questions, please make sure to use our Q&A chat box feature. And once Kelly is done with his talk, he and I will get to your questions after the presentation. Kelly, let me just share the presentation real quick, and then you can begin your talk.
Sure.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kelly, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me. I have to say two things at the very top. First, I think Education USA is one of my favorite things that the U.S. government supports around the world. I think that it is one of the most valuable resources and set of experts we have for higher education study around the world. If you have any questions on from an official perspective on how to apply for uh, higher education in the United States, Education USA is the official one-stop shop. So happy to be here and joining my colleagues from EdUSA. Also want to thank you for highlighting the Fulbright application that it's open right now. So for people that are interested in the master's or PhD Fulbright opportunity, application is open. You still have plenty of time, over a month, to apply. So encourage all of you to consider it. I am, as you heard, a proud Fulbright alumnus. It was one of the best experiences of my entire life. And I am here as a US diplomat because of my Fulbright experience. So encourage all of you to consider it. As you heard, what we'll be talking about today are writing statements of purpose. I'm breaking this into kind of two different lenses, one that's focused on graduate studies in the United States and one that's focused on exchange programs. A lot of the same tools and tactics, do's and don'ts, apply to both, but there are a couple of key differences that we'll go over today. One of the things I want you to think about as I'm talking today is how you're going to write your statement of purpose to make you sound unique. And if you've worked at all with EdUSA before, you've probably heard us talk about best fit or good fit. The statement of purpose is all about demonstrating how you, as the individual, are a perfect match for either the graduate school that you're applying to or the exchange. This is your one opportunity to highlight what makes you special to the decision panel. So with that, I think we can hop to the next slide. So, what is a statement of purpose? I'm sure many of you have written them before or reviewed them, um, but it is the opportunity for you to tell the decision panel, usually more than one person, who is deciding who to admit to a graduate school or select for an exchange program, who you are and why you are a good fit or the best fit for the program. You might be applying to a graduate school or an exchange program that has hundreds of openings, and you might be applying for an opportunity that has one singular opportunity, one space available. So this is your chance to really make an impact. As I've touched on, this is used for scholarships, fellowships, academic admission, and exchange programs. So when I think about the United States, I know that every single graduate program, whether that's master's, PhD, or some postdoctoral fellowships, all of them require a statement of purpose or more than one. And I can say for certain that all of our exchange programs from the US government, many of them in partnership with USEFP, require statements of purpose, or sometimes people call them personal statements. Those are often used interchangeably. So you might hear personal statement or statement of purpose. The statement of purpose covers current and future professional and academic career plans. If you have relevant previous experience, really great to highlight that as well. But the institution, the decision panel, or the folks reviewing your application, they're all looking towards the future. So I would encourage you all to be future focused when writing these. Ground your experience in your previous experience, but explain why that's important to you today and in the future. And then finally, it demonstrates why you're qualified compared to other applicants. Remember, you are not the only one applying. Sometimes there are tens of thousands of applicants. And this is your, like I said, your one and only chance to really make that distinction and show that decision panel why you are special and why you are the best fit for that opportunity. Go to the next one. All right. So, if we are looking at graduate school admissions, like I said, this is a little bit different for graduate school admissions as it is for exchange programs like Fulbright, but there are a lot of similarities. So let's first focus on graduate school admissions. And I have to say, I did my graduate studies in the United States, and so I've been through this experience actually more than once, so with differing degrees of success. So first, you want to explain what you want to study and why. And remember, if you're applying for a graduate program, you have to be specific. It's not enough just to say, I want to study biology. You have to explain what you want to study and the impact you're going to have. What part of biology? What's your focus area? And why is it important to you? You also want to show how your prior experience will benefit the research or work of your graduate program. So, this isn't just about what you get from your graduate studies, it's about what you offer the institution. If you have a specific skill set, maybe you have a unique language that you speak, maybe you have a unique background in a specific field that most people don't have. They want to recruit people into their graduate program that can help build that graduate program. So focus not just on how you will be benefited, but how you will benefit that school or institution. And then this is really important, this third bullet. And this is one thing that's pretty unique to graduate studies. You want to highlight why that university, that one specific university, is that perfect match for you. And this can be for a couple of reasons. I have listed three of them here, but these aren't the only ones. You can highlight that there's a specific faculty member, so a professor or scholar that is really tied to your area of interest and your work. And you can name them. You can say, I want to work with Dr. Johnson because of her work on X, Y, and Z. How a lot of graduate studies or graduate admissions process work in the United States is that there's an initial decision panel, general people who read all of the applications, but then they narrow the applications down to specific fields of study and will actually hand those admission packages to the professors that you'll be studying under. If you've named that professor, that package will likely go to that specific professor and they will be able to read why you want to work with them. It's really unique. It's very, very different from the undergraduate applications you may have filled out in the past or may have looked into. So this is really important. You can also highlight specific facilities or equipment. This is especially true in the sciences as well as the arts. If you, for instance, need a spectrometer or you need a specific level of diagnostics lab to conduct your research, and you know that university has that specific equipment, by all means, build that need and that unique fit into your statement of purpose. Or, like I said, for arts, it can be they have a really wonderful program focused on 3D technology built forms of art. So it doesn't have to just be about science and math and technology. It can be about other forms of facility or equipment that maybe you don't have here in Pakistan, or maybe other universities don't have in the United States, which is why you are applying for this specific opportunity. And it can also be focused on things like geographic location, languages, or demographics. For instance, if you're interested in applying for international relations, Washington, D.C. is a fantastic place to be because you have all of the embassies from around the world located in one small city, and you have the entire US government in that same city. That's a very unique geographic opportunity for you as an international student. That's not to say that's the only place you can study that field, but it's one thing you might want to highlight or just an example of something. Similarly, with languages, if you are entering a program that focuses on South Asia policy or history or anthropology, you can say, I speak Pashto or Urdu, and you can be that student that stands out because a lot of American students applying for that similar program, or Australian students or German students, might not have the same language skills you have. So you bring that unique perspective into your application, something the university decision panel will be looking for. All right, now let's talk about exchange programs. All right. So again, a lot of the rules apply, but a little bit different with exchange programs. For our exchange programs, and I'm speaking specifically for the United States, I haven't done any exchange programs in other countries. So looking just at the programs the US offers. So you want to explain why you want to study in the United States. Believe it or not, I've read applications from people applying to the Fulbright program to the United States that say, I would like to study the United States or Germany or the UK or France or Japan or Korea. The decision panel is going to be made up of people from the United States mission and our partners like USEFP. It's great you might want to study in a different country, but you're applying to the United States. So explain why you want to study in the United States and why that's important to you. You also want to show how you'll be successful while living abroad. If you've never studied abroad, that is okay. We oftentimes actually look for people with limited travel abroad, especially to the United States. But demonstrate why you will be successful living abroad, why you'll be successful learning in a new environment with a diverse set of students in your program, your exchange program, or your university program. One of the things the panel will always be looking out for is, will this person actually be able to finish their program, or is there some barrier that will stop them from completing the exchange program? Like the graduate school applications, you also want to highlight your experience and work to demonstrate why you are a unique fit for this exchange program. And then last but not least, and perhaps the thing that people leave out the most of all of the exchange applications that I read, is demonstrating what positive impact you will have once you return to Pakistan. We really want you to benefit from an exchange program like Fulbright or SUSI or Global UGrad, any of the exchange programs that we offer. However, we also want you to have a positive impact on your community and your country once you return. So if you are working in anthropology and you are applying for a Fulbright to get a master's degree in anthropology, what do you plan to do with that degree once you come back? Are you going to teach the next generation of anthropologists in Pakistan? Are you going to help bridge intercultural gaps and connections between people in Pakistan or people in the region or around the world? What impact will you have once you return? That's one of the biggest questions you have to answer in your statement of purpose for exchange programs. All right. Now, the next thing I'll suggest when you're filling out your applications is to think like the reader. So think like the decision panel. One of the things I can say from my perspective and why I really enjoy giving these presentations is I've been a reader many, 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 many times. I've done it for exchange programs. I've done it for graduate schools, and I've been on the other side of it. As a Fulbrighter, I've had to go through the application. As a graduate school student, I had to go through the applications. And so I've been on both sides. And I think the most helpful thing you can do is frame your mentality, frame your mind around what the reader is going to be experiencing when they're reading your statement of purpose. So, one of the first things to remember is that each and every panel member, each decision maker, has many, 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 many applications to read. I'll give you one example. We just closed one of our exchange program applications for about 4 spots for people to go do an exchange in the United States. We had nearly 12,000 applications for just 4 slots. And each of those applications can be up to 20, 30, or 40 pages long. So it's I think it's pretty reasonable to say that it's impossible for each of the panel members to read every application in full. If you have 12,000 to read for 4 slots and they're all 20 to 40 pages long, it's just not possible to read every last word of each of the applications. So it's up to you to make sure that you have a good statement of purpose that stands out. And this is a little bit of a negative thing to say, but I'll say it anyway. It's just an inside look. The panels are looking for an easy way to screen out applications. So if they have a pile of 12,000 applications and they can find one reason to reject your application, they're going to, because they have to get down to those last 4 out of the 12,000. So don't give them a reason to screen out your application. Make it as memorable and as understandable as possible so that they can keep it in the yes pile or the maybe pile. You want to stay out of the screen out pile or the no pile. Also, if they don't understand what you wrote, they will not understand you as an applicant. And we'll get into that a little bit deeper once we talk about the do's and the don'ts of writing a statement of purpose or a personal statement. But if your application isn't clear, or if it's too technical, or if you're using a lot of abbreviations that people in the United States don't understand, they're not going to understand why you're a perfect fit for that opportunity, whether it's a graduate school or an exchange program. And finally, remember, they need reasons to remember you. If you give them a really long resume, that's great. And then if you repeat that resume in your statement of purpose, that's not helpful. They're not going to remember dates and facts and figures. They're going to remember something unique about you, why you match exactly what that exchange opportunity or that graduate school is looking for, or an interesting story or narrative that you build in to make you sound a little bit more uh, memorable, familiar, and like somebody they want to bring to their school, their institution, or to the United States on an exchange. Let's go hop to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to have two slides of things that you should consider, you should do. These are the do's. So be sure to answer the prompt. Remember when I said that the decision makers, the panel members, are looking for reasons to screen out applications? The easiest way to do that for somebody reading an application is, well, this person didn't answer the question I asked. So if the prompt is as general as tell us why you want the Fulbright, answer that question. If it is tell us what impact you hope to have on your home country once you return from your graduate program, that's the question you have to answer. Read the prompt and answer the prompt. Um, Again, if you don't answer the question that's being asked of you or the series of questions, because sometimes the statement of purpose is broken into multiple parts, then that's an easy way to discard you and move on to the next person. Uh, the next one is pretty obvious, but one that we see as a pitfall quite often. Answer the who, what, where, when, and why. Then reread your statement of purpose and ask yourself, where's the who, where's the what, where's the where's the where's the why. If you can't answer those questions from your own personal statement, it's because they're not in there. And if you don't address each one of those, you're not going to have a successful statement of purpose. You also need to be specific and tailor your statements to each university or exchange program. Unlike something like undergraduate programs where you might have a common app that goes out to multiple universities based off of one statement of purpose or one application, almost all, or all exchange programs, and I would say most graduate programs require specific tailored statements. If you're referencing programs at other universities or other opportunities, or if you're applying for the Fulbright PhD, but you're referencing um, wanting to apply for a program in the United Kingdom because you've copied and pasted, that's not going to be helpful. That's a really easy way for the panel to discard your application. So be specific and tailor your statements to each of the programs you're applying to. And that includes if you're applying to similar programs, graduate programs, for instance, at different institutions. If you're applying for a PhD in mathematics at MIT and a PhD in mathematics at Harvard, still tailor your statements to each of those universities. Don't use the same statement across different schools. Also, consider demonstrating your uniqueness and consider your own diversity. Why would this benefit you? Why would this benefit your community? Maybe you are the first person in your family, you're a first generation graduate student. Maybe you represent an underserved group that brings a new perspective to that exchange program, that graduate program, or that institution or university. It's not only to highlight your uniqueness, but it's also a way for them to remember you so that you stand out against the thousands of other applicants. All right. Continuing on the things that you should be doing in your statement of purpose. So you want to write your statement of purpose as if the reader knows nothing about your academic or professional field. I can say that as somebody who will read many of the Fulbright applications that come in March and April, I am not an expert in STEM. I'm not an expert in sociology. I'm not an expert in a lot of fields. If I can't understand your application and your statement of purpose, I can't say yes to your application. You have to write it as if the reader doesn't know what your academic or professional field is. So that means saying and writing your work and the significance of it in pretty simple, straightforward, short, and concise ways. Similarly, and this is especially true for graduate programs, write your statement as if your reader knows nothing about Pakistan. If you reference the volume of glaciers in Gilgit, for instance, somebody in Minnesota probably doesn't have any concept for what GB is in Pakistan. So it's not to say that it's not important, but you have to help explain it in your personal statement. You have to help let them know why this region of Pakistan is so important, why perhaps it's at risk for climate change or whatever reason you might be bringing that part of Pakistan geography, culture, government into your personal statement. Assume that your reader in the US doesn't know much about Pakistan. Next, and this is another obvious one, it's one that I struggle with personally, is edit, edit, edit. It is exhausting writing multiple personal statements. It's exhausting writing one personal statement. But that should not stop you from writing one draft, taking a pause, do something else, watch your favorite TV show, come back to that personal statement and reread it. And I would suggest reread it out loud. Speak your personal statement or your statement of purpose out loud. What you want to that will help you not only with flow and with clarity, but it'll help you catch common mistakes or typos that you might not if you're just reading in your head without verbally saying your statement of purpose. The next one I would really encourage everybody to consider is to ask your friends and family to read your personal statement. There is no shame in having 7 of your best friends, your professors, your mentors, your mom or dad, your grandma, read your personal statement. It's going to do a couple of things. One, they're going to help you edit to make sure you don't have typos. Two, they're going to be able to tell you, does what you're saying make sense? One of the things that's really tricky with graduate school applications and advanced exchange program applications like Fulbright, Master's, and PhD is that you are coming to the application with a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. And sometimes we lose ourselves in our own experience. We assume that people know the same things we know. If your grandma or your mentor or your high school teacher that you ask to read your prompt or ask to read your statement of purpose doesn't understand what you're saying, they can help you figure out the words, the language, and sentences to use to communicate your knowledge, your expertise to to a general audience. And then last but not least on this page, again, answer the prompt. This is the most important thing. This is probably the most common mistake I see made across the hundreds of applications that I've read this year alone is answer the prompt, answer the question that's being asked. Otherwise, you can guarantee your entire application will be moved to the no pile. So next, let's talk about what not to do. These are things that you need to avoid. You'll see them mirror or be the opposite of what we just talked about in the previous slides. So first, do not use the same statement of purpose for more than one application. Again, for this level of personal statement or statement of purpose, for the graduate programs and for these types of exchange programs, the more senior exchange programs, you cannot use the same statement of purpose for more than one application because it needs to be tailored to either that institution, that university, or to the specific graduate or the specific exchange program. If it's general, again, people will see that it's general. The decision makers will put it into the no pile. Another thing I see often is the overuse of acronyms or abbreviations. If your reader cannot understand what the acronym is, there's no meaning to the rest of the sentence, right? So make sure that if you're using acronyms or abbreviations, spell them out on first use a parentheses, and then give the acronym. That allows somebody to have an understanding of what you're talking about, and then you can use the acronym or abbreviation later on. If you are going to use acronyms or abbreviations, make sure that they are 100% universal. That includes people here in Pakistan and in the United States, that they all know what that acronym is. So a couple of examples might be UN. Most people around the world will know UN means United Nations. COVID-19 is another abbreviation that is common now, and you don't need to spell out the full COVID-19. And same with an organization as renowned as NASA, for instance. If it's not universally known, don't use just the acronym. You have to spell it out. Also, don't name drop unless the person is known to you and or the reader. So if you say, I met Kelly Ryan at the US Embassy, the person reading your application at MIT is not going to know who Kelly Ryan is. If you say, I'm applying for a global health PhD program, and I worked with Dr. Tedros at the WHO, and this is the work we did together. You're showing that you have a personal relationship with that expert, that impressive person, and you're saying how it ties into the program that you're applying to. And it's somebody probably renowned enough that the experts reading your application will know who that person is. Otherwise, you can leave out the names because it's just, if somebody doesn't know who you're talking about, it's just taking up space in your statement of purpose. And then last but not least on this slide is do not rely on AI to draft your statements for you. You have to write them yourselves. We had an exchange program close not too long ago, and there was a group of us reading about 8,000 applications. And every single one of us that was reading these applications could tell immediately when it was written by AI. And that allowed us to not even look at the rest of the application. We can tell when it's AI generated. One of the things that I think people don't realize is if somebody's using the same prompt, if there's 8,000 people applying for the same graduate school and the prompt is the same for all 8,000 people, AI generators will start using the same language across all of those applications. And we can easily check that on our end. So sometimes you might get through by using AI, but for the most part, by application 30, we've already seen the AI generated responses and we can easily throw out applications as they come to us. So write it on your own. It is much better to have a good personal statement with a mistake or two than a grammatically correct personal statement that was generated by AI that doesn't tell us anything about who you are as the applicant. All right. So we're going to go through two examples. These are two examples that I borrowed from my colleagues at Education USA, but I think that they're two that are really fantastic. Just to show you quick paragraphs, and I'll go through why these are good or not good. So the first one is, I'll just read it aloud just in case people don't have it on their screen. But the line is, I have a bachelor's degree in education and I love my job as a teacher. Students and youth are the future, and education is their key to success. I would like to dive deeper into the field of education with a Fulbright scholarship. I know that my experience through Fulbright will make me a better teacher, and my English students will definitely benefit from my new skills. So I would say this is, and we can drum roll and click the next button. This is not a good example of what to do in a statement of purpose. This is very general. This doesn't tell me why you want the Fulbright program, why Fulbright's the right way. Why can't you do any other program that's for teachers? This doesn't tell me what you want to do when you come back to Pakistan. It doesn't tell me who you want to work with or where. It doesn't tell me which part of education you want to focus on. It's very general. And we see a lot of these because people are very passionate about their work, as you should be, but don't let your passion override the who, what, where, when, and why. You have to be specific and you have to demonstrate why you're the best applicant. So let's go to one more example. All right. So this one is, if admitted to the Missoula University Graduate School of Sociology, I would like to study under Dr. Denise O'Lear. Her work on aging families and informal caregiving grounds my academic research and provides an important framework for my work in Pakistan. My goal is to build on Dr. O'Lear's qualitative study of the aging family in rural America and compare it to rural communities in 4 regions of Pakistan over the next 5 years. Through this research, I can better advise practicing caregivers and improve the quality of life for thousands of Pakistanis. So, we hit the next button. We see that this is a good example of what to do. If you go back and think about the who, what, where, when, and why, you'll see that there is a who. We know that the person wants to research under Dr. Denise O'Lear. We know the what. What do they want to research? They want to research Dr. O'Lear's work on aging families and rural communities. The where wants to be at Missoula University Graduate School of Sociology to come back to Pakistan. So you can go through each of those, and each of those highlighted red sections will tell you one of those 5 W's. And this is really detailed. You'll also notice there's a typo in here. Um, that's okay. There's one. Had I asked more people to edit this, they probably would have caught it. Had I asked my mom to check this for me, she definitely would have caught it. But that one typo does not distract me from the rest of this entire example. This gives me what I need as a panel member, as a decision maker, to say, oh, this applicant knows exactly what they want to do. They want to work with a specific person at my university. Their goal is very clear to me, and I can tell what impact they're going to have in Pakistan on their home communities if they complete this graduate school. So these are just two examples. There's plenty more, and I've seen Education USA's really great PowerPoint on this. So there's a lot of wonderful examples to look to of what not to do and what not to do. So I've talked a lot, and I appreciate all of you listening. I hope it was helpful. But now I think the more exciting part is the question and answer. So I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I think we have just a few questions. For those of you that are wondering or those that have any sort of questions, please use our Q&A chat box feature, and Kelly and I will get to your questions. I think in the meantime, I can read out the first question to you, and maybe you can respond. So,
Sure.
a lot of students you generally ask about the difference between, a statement of purpose and a personal statement. And a sort of an interconnected question is that what sort of narrative do they need to build or develop in their statements? I mean, does it need to be does it there do they need to develop their statements in a way where it is a narrative, or do they need to use very descriptive jargon? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So, in terms of the difference between a personal statement or a statement of purpose, it really, really depends on the either the exchange or the school that you're applying to. There's no clear definition of each. So, some schools will use a personal statement for you to tell them about you. As an individual, and a statement of purpose might be what is the reason you want to study that graduate program. Or they might just have one and they use it interchangeably. Or you might have a personal statement that again it's about you, and then three other questions that are about your field of research, your level of impact, and your ideal graduate school mentor. Going back to my previous slides, just be sure that you're answering the prompt. So whether they call it a personal statement, a statement of purpose, explain your research goals, really doesn't matter as long as you're answering the question that's in front of you, and making sure that you're giving them the details. In terms of the narrative versus the technical jargon, again, that's going to be a little bit specific on the program you're applying to. However, I am a really, really big fan personally when I write, but also when I'm reading applications. If you have a narrative, if you have a story to tell, that is easier for me to remember. So if I hear that Fatima is the first in her community to go to graduate school and the first in her family to study STEM. And she's working to teach high school students or secondary students how to do robotics. And she's telling me in an interesting way where I can, in my head, visualize what she's doing in her community or in her work. That I can remember. So when maybe Fatima's application is the fourth application I read, 500 applications later, I can still say, oh no, I really like that Fatima is focusing on robotics, and that she's the first in her community to go to graduate school. That I can remember. If Fatima just says, on this date, I trained 15 students in robotics at this high school that I have as an American, no context for, that level of kind of facts and figures is really hard. So there is a difference between, for instance, a CV and a resume that is very facts and figures and timeline, and a story that you're telling in your personal statement or statement of purpose. So I always lean towards narrative storytelling with important facts and figures, but really focus on the narrative storytelling because that's going to be more memorable to your reader as they go through the thousands of applications.
Thank you, Kelly. And since you were talking about the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose, a lot of people were also wondering about what the main difference between a motivation letter and a statement of purpose is. So how different is a statement of purpose from a motivation letter, say to a job application, for a job application or
Yeah. So again, they can be similar. What I would say is usually there are usually parameters around each of them, right? So they might say, what is your motivation for this graduate program? What is your motivation for this job? This is explaining to them, like, why do you want this thing for you? One of the things I see for motivation letters or motivation statements is people still make it very much about them. You should be introducing yourself as a memorable applicant, but you also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, you should be sharing with them not just how this experience will benefit you, but how you will benefit the institution, the whether it's a company, a university, or the exchange program. You have to show that you are valuable to the people reading your application as well. So it's this kind of two-way street. Again, there's no firm definition between statement of purpose, personal statement, motivation statement. Just read the instructions. The format itself is not going to matter too much, as long as you're following the instructions on the application.
And we have another question. So somebody was wondering if they can switch their field from finance to data science through the Fulbright application, through the Fulbright scholarship, excuse me. They're saying that they do not have a lot of experience when it comes to data science, but they do have a lot of experience in finance, but now they would like to shift to a different field. So if it'd be great if you could talk about, changing fields and doing a graduate degree in a different degree program, and how could they sort of reflect those changes in their personal statement.
Yes, this is actually a great question. So thank you very much for asking it. One of the things that I personally really like about the United States is in how we treat education, is that we are really flexible. So for instance, my brother, I don't think he would mind me sharing this. My brother studied biology in undergrad and then got a graduate degree in Chinese language. Very different fields, right? In the United States, that flexibility is really appreciated. We know that if you study data science in undergrad and data science in graduate school and data science at the PhD level, for instance, and then get a Fulbright for data science, you'll be an expert in data science. But there's a lot of people that have design background, that are fantastic data science experts because they can show data to lay audiences. So the key is, for instance, to demonstrate that you have the skill set and explain why you want to make that shift. When it comes to exchange programs like Fulbright, again, one of the things we're really, really focused on is, can you show that you will be able to complete the program? As I'm sure you know, and my colleagues at USEFP can attest to this as well, the something like a Fulbright is very, very expensive. It's an investment in that individual, and if that person can't finish their degree program because they don't have the skill set to do so and they have to come home early and never get the degree, then that's not a good investment. That's not something we want to see. We want to see that person be as successful as possible, and part of that is getting their degree. So in your application, if you're switching from finance to data science, for instance, explain why, and then explain why your skill set that you learned in finance, or if you've been doing other things, volunteer, additional studies, internships, why those things prepare you for that data science degree. So making sure that the evaluation panel, the decision makers know that you will still be successful even if you switch. Just because you switch is not a negative. Sometimes it's a positive. So be open-minded and flexible, but just make sure we know why and know that you can be successful in that new program.
Thank you, Kelly. And we have another question. Um, so the question is that since most PhD programs are well-funded, fully funded or well-funded by assistantships in the United States, why should we consider applying through the Fulbright for a PhD program?
That's another great question. I would say do both. The timing is going to be a little bit different. Our goal is that we get as many qualified Pakistanis to the United States to study as possible. Not just because we know that the Pakistanis are brilliant and have a lot to offer in whatever field it might be, but selfishly we know that Americans have a lot to learn from Pakistanis, and so we really value that relationship, that intercultural relationship that comes with international education. And then we know that when you come back to Pakistan, you're doing incredible work. So our Fulbrighters and our graduate alumni really are changing the landscape of Pakistan, the region, and the world on a daily basis. So I would say apply for both. As somebody that's done both a graduate program and the Fulbright program, I can say Fulbright is fantastic because you never have to really worry about where the funding's coming from. It's backed by the US government, and so you don't have to apply year after year or be worried about your graduate program cutting back on funding. The other thing is that there is a level of prestige with Fulbright that is unmatched, I would say. It is one of the most prestigious awards in the world, and it's very valuable. The other thing is that for all of our exchange programs, once you return, you become part of a vast alumni network. Here in Pakistan, it's called the Pakistan U.S. Alumni Network, or PUAN, which gives you lifelong benefits that no other person gets in the world. So there are different advantages, but I would say if you have the time and the energy, and you're nervous that you might not get one or the other, apply for both graduate fully funded programs and the Fulbright program.
Thank you, Kelly. And it would also be great if you could comment on and talk about study gaps and how admissions committees are sort of, you know, reviewing applications that are commenting on their study gaps or, a really big gap of say 18 years. Because a lot of students in the Q&A chat box were wondering if it's possible for them to get a scholarship, even if it's been like 18 years and they're returning to school after a really long time. So how could they use the statement of purpose to sort of comment on this gap that they have?
Yes, absolutely. This is another thing that I think is a benefit in the United States is that for the most part, our exchange programs as well as our graduate schools see gaps if well used as good good use of your time as benefits. So there is a slight movement that I've seen. This is anecdotal of people of institutions moving away from you've got your undergraduate degree this year and then immediately went to a master's program and then immediately went to a PhD program. That's not necessary. You can have long gaps, you can have short gaps. The really important part is to explain what did you do in that gap that prepares you to be successful at that graduate school or in that exchange program. That can include additional studies. It can include internships, full on jobs and careers, volunteer opportunities, world travel, um, starting a family and raising a family, and now it's your turn to continue your career and trajectory. The important thing is that you explain what you did in that gap and how it's prepared you for whatever opportunity you're applying for, but do not hesitate to apply just because you have a gap in your academic record.
Thank you. And just give me a second. Okay, so for the Fulbright application, do students need to mention or keep in mind the schools that they sort of are targeting for? And do they need to sort of mention the names of the professors that they would like to work with in the future when they're applying for the Fulbright application? So, do they need to be very specific when they're writing their statement of purpose? And do they need to keep in mind the schools that they're looking out for or the professors that are at those particular schools?
So for the Fulbright program, it's great to have an idea of what universities you want to attend, but there are how Fulbright is structured is the State Department, the agency that I work for, works with select universities in the US. So not every university participates in the Fulbright program, a lot of the really big name ones do, and a lot of the smaller name ones as well. Just know that you're not going to have the ultimate final decision necessarily, depending on the exchange program. Some programs you have no say, some programs you have a little bit of say. So just know that's less of an expectation for the Fulbright program and for other exchanges. For the actual statement of purpose, what I would say is don't talk about the specific schools, because one of the or don't rely too much on naming specific schools or professors, because one of the things we look out for is, well, this person really wants to say, and this happens all the time, this person really wants to go study under X professor at Harvard University. Well, what if Harvard's not accepting Fulbrights that year? Or what if we can't place you into Harvard because we have 17 other people we're sending to that university? Then we think, okay, well, are they going to be happy if they don't get that choice? So when it comes to exchange programs, and it comes to Fulbright in particular, explain why the United States is the right fit. So this is treat the U.S. as a country as your goal location, your goal endpoint. Is it the United States because the level of education, the type of equipment that's offered, the access to certain businesses or public-private partnerships or whatever your field is? Why is the United States the right answer? And that's what I would say for exchanges. So don't focus on specific professors or graduate schools and degrees. Focus on the United States and what that has to offer you.
Thank you, Kelly. And since you kind of really talked about the prompts that usually schools or programs provide you with, the statement of purpose prompts that you need to abide by, there are usually a set of questions in that particular prompt that you for the statement of purpose, and a lot of students were wondering if there's any particular order that you need to follow. For instance, if a prompt say has three questions, question A, question B, question C, you need to make sure that you're following that particular order of questions. You're answering them in in a particular order, or can it be super random?
I so so if the it's kind of depends on how the application itself is set up, and I've seen it multiple ways. If there is a statement of purpose and there's one text box for your background, one text box for your future goals, one text box for your postgraduate impact, then yes, you answer that text box based off the question right above it. The other way, the more common way I've seen it is they'll say, statement of purpose, please explain your academic background, your professional goals, as well as the impact you hope to have on your community. That, if you have one text box for all of that, so just one statement for those three questions, um, there is no particular order. A lot of people find it really helpful to follow the order given, but what I found is, again, rely on narrative storytelling. So your story should have a beginning, middle, and end. Your story should talk about your past, your present, and your future. Make sure that your story makes sense. If you're trying to hit the questions in a specific order and that order doesn't quite make sense, and your statement doesn't flow, then it's not going to be memorable. It's going to be something they can just push to the side and say this person's not selected for the program. So I would say focus on clarity, and there typically is no right order. You don't have to answer the questions in the order they're given, if they're asking for one overall statement.
Thank you. And a lot of students were wondering about their academic credentials, and quite specifically their CGPA, and they were wondering if they can use the statement to sort of comment on that, or use the statement to sort of outline how they are great as a student regardless of their academic credentials or their performance during their undergrad years. So how could they comment on that using the personal statement or the statement of purpose?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and I certainly can't speak for all graduate schools, because I am not on their admissions panels. But GPA is one piece of the whole picture, right? So when I'm reading applications, and most recently that's for exchange programs, but I have done it for academic programs in the past. I say, okay, this person has a medium or low GPA. What does the rest of their statement of purpose say? You don't necessarily have to say, I have a low GPA because the classes I took were really, really hard and the professor was terrible and I couldn't understand it. Don't bring that up in your personal statement. You don't need to directly address your GPA in your personal statement because they're going to see it somewhere else. And you should have more important things to talk about because you're trying to show the entire picture of you, not just focus on one part of that picture. The other thing that you're at risk of doing if you highlight a middle or low GPA in your statement of purpose is you're just reminding that reader that you have a middle or low GPA, right? They may have already forgotten about it because it was in a different part of the application, and you're just reminding them of that potentially negative point. The last thing I'll say is if you do have a very specific reason, so this is a very extreme example, but I've seen it before. I was studying at undergrad, and my entire university had to shut down because of a disaster, or my family had to be relocated because of an emergency incident. I had to start up at a brand new school dealing with this hardship that can only speak to that GPA, but it can also add to that diversity we talked about, making sure that you're a memorable, unique applicant and explains a little bit about your background and history. I would only do that if it's true and it is a pretty important, impactful, or extreme example. Otherwise, just use your statement of purpose to highlight the wonderful things about you and the wonderful things about what you want to do in your future.
Thank you, Kelly. And I think since we're sort of out of time, we're almost out of time. So I think I'm just going to take one last question. And that,
Sure.
excuse me, and that sort of is related to exchange programs and how that could impact your Fulbright and graduate applications. So somebody was wondering, and they have said that they participated in an exchange program called TEA, which I believe is a Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program in 2015. And now they're applying for the Fulbright scholarship. So will that participation sort of impact or affect their applications since preferences are usually given to those people who have not really visited the United States before?
That's a really great question. It's one I'm asked all of the time. So, the first thing I would say is go to USEFP's website, go to the 2025 Fulbright application, and look at the eligibility requirements. I believe I actually have not looked for this cycle, but I believe that typically we don't do Fulbright PhD or master's for people who have participated in exchange programs in the last, I think, 5 years who received who are part of a degree awarding exchange program. So you can't apply for a Fulbright PhD if you received a Fulbright master's in 2020, for instance. But go and look at that eligibility first and foremost. Second, I would say if you're not ineligible, so you are eligible, you can apply for the Fulbright program, absolutely do it. But you're going to have a slightly higher burden. You're going to have to demonstrate to the panel why your first exchange experience wasn't sufficient, not in a bad way, but that your first exchange experience maybe set you up for the next level of success. Why that grounds or why that informs or why that is a benefit to your Fulbright program. And then it's going to be really, really important to hit on the why the United States. The panel is going to be thinking, okay, he, she, or they have already had a US experience. Why should they go back? You're going to have to be very explicit and very clear why a US master's or PhD is right for you and why you can only get it in the United States. So just be very clear in the why the US part of your application.
Thank you, Kelly. And I think we can just take one last question since this
Sure.
question seems to be like a really popular one. So what is usually the recommended or the required length for a statement of proposal or a purpose that you're writing?
Oh, this is a good question. I would say most of the time the applications will have a word limit, or will give if your text box is not limited, then they'll have a word limit in the actual prompt itself. Um, I would say in those cases, use all of the space that you have, but we have a general rule: we say use the space you have, but keep some white space. So the space, where there's no text, whether it's a line in between or indenting, just because it's much easier to read if you have some separation in your paragraphs and in your lines. But if you don't use the whole space, the panel might think, well, they don't have a lot to tell us, and the other applicants have a lot of really positive things they're writing about. This person only has a couple of things. If there is no limit, which I can't think of the last time I've seen something with no limit, but if there is no limit, then make sure you control your own story, your own narrative. Don't go on and on and on. Make sure it's clear, it's concise, you say what you need to say, and then you end it. Remember, if the decision makers are reviewing tens of thousands of applications that can be 20 to 40 pages long, we don't have time to read everything. So put the most important stuff up top. Tell us what we need to know. Tell a memorable story, and then move on to the rest of your application. No need to write a whole novel or biography. We don't have time to read it. So I hope that was helpful. But it just really depends on the space provided by the application itself.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we do not have a lot of time for any more questions. But thank you so much, Kelly, for such an informative and engaging session. And thank you for answering all the questions at the very end. It was a pleasure listening to you. I'm certain that, all of our participants found the information and techniques that you've shared very useful and insightful. And, I believe that they feel more confident approaching the statements that they're currently working on. So if you guys have any sort of questions about today's sessions or any questions in general about the United States higher education, please reach out to your Education USA advisor. If you have not already, please register for our free advising services by visiting our website, www.educationusa.pk. Also, do not forget to follow EdUSA Pakistan social media pages and USEFP social media pages as well for information related to fully funded programs in the United States. You'll find a wealth of information and resources covering a number of aspects related to studying in the United States. And just good luck to every single one of you who's working on their Fulbright and graduate applications. And thank you very much for joining and participating. Thank you, Kelly, for joining in today and leading the session. It was wonderful hearing you, and we hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.